Hi there, everybody. This is Wendy Hernandez, and welcome back for another episode of the Family Law Insider podcast. Today, I am thrilled to have a guest who's going to talk to us about why money does matter. I have Chandra Winford, and she's an author, she's a speaker, she's a financial professional, and she coaches people on managing money. She's an author of a book. She's going to talk to us about the book. But today she's going to give us some practical strategies on handling money, whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship. And, I like to talk about this subject because so many relationships I see in the office come apart because money. They're not agreeing on money, or the relationship is over and one or two people are broke. So while past episodes have talked about a lot of the internal beliefs and values that go into manifesting more money into your life, with Chandra, we may talk about some of that, but a lot of it's going to be practical. So welcome, Chandra, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Thanks, Chandra. So can you tell us a little bit about your work and how long you've been doing it and exactly what you do?
Yes, so I am a financial analyst by trade. Most recently, I was the CFO for my ministry, and earlier this year, I launched my own business, Winford Financial, and part of that is to continue doing, my book's been out for a little over a year now, and so I'm focusing on doing webinars and workshops to help people get their finances together.
Oh. Do you hear that, Chandra?
I do hear some noise in the background.
It's weird.
It's like somebody else. Okay.
Are you there, Chandra?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep, something weird happened. Okay. So let's start again because this is not, it's not live on the air right now.
Okay.
Something weird happened. I'm sorry about that. But what we'll do is that first part will be edited out.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right. So, welcome back, everybody, for another episode of the Family Law Insider podcast. My name is Wendy Hernandez, and I'm your host. I'm really excited to have today's guest with us. Her name's Chandra Winford, and Chandra is an author. She's a financial professional, and she's the author of Money Does Matter. And today, Chandra is going to be talking about why it does matter and how to treat it, whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship. And the reason I think this topic is so important is because in the area of family law, the area where I practice law, a lot of times relationships come apart because of money and the quote lack of. Other times I see people who are post-divorce and there is no money. There's one or two people who are really broke. So Chandra, I'm hoping, is going to give us some really practical steps about getting back on track and not having to live off credit cards or living paycheck to paycheck. So welcome, Chandra, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm excited to be with you today.
So Chandra, can you talk to the listeners about what it is that you do, how long you've been doing it, and how you help people?
Yes. So I am a financial analyst by trade, which I did for most of my career. And then most recently, I was the CFO for my ministry. And earlier this year, I stepped out to open my own company, Winford Financial. And I've been doing financial workshops now for a little over a year since I put out my book. I do webinars, I do workshops, and just do one-on-one sessions as well.
Okay, and I read a little bit about you and your accomplishments on your website, and congratulations because you've done fantastic things.
Thank you.
And can you just share with the listeners how you were able to turn around your ministry's financial situation in a year's time?
Yes. So one of the key things when I came in was to assess where the ministry was. And my biggest thing being a financial analyst was to analyze the finances of the ministry, find areas of waste, do a lot of negotiations with our vendors. I identified the top 25 vendors, called them, let them know how much money we spent with them, that we needed to make adjustments, and just focusing on the essentials and what was necessary. And that also, is going to relate into personal life when it comes to staying within your budget.
Okay, great. So that's awesome. So you helped this ministry turn it around from a deficit into being in the black. That's what you describe on your website, right?
That is correct.
Okay, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So talk to me about individuals, and I'm curious, about your advice, not just for my clients, but for me as well. Because, despite being an attorney, people often think that attorneys are, quote, rich. And I am rich in a lot of areas. I think that I could do better. My husband and I could do a lot better with the money. And although we make a great living, I still feel like we are living paycheck to paycheck. So I'm interested, as far as individuals, like single people and couples, what strategies do you have for people? Where do they start in getting on track and not living paycheck to paycheck, where their bank account is down to the last $5 before payday comes again?
Exactly. So let's just start in general, and then we'll go more specific to the couples. So in general, one of the things that I do in my workshop is I like to make it realistic to people so people understand the importance of what I'm saying. So one of the first things I say is, let's go back a year from today. And I ask 3 simple questions. The first one is, how many people put the same amount of money in their gas tank today as they did a year ago? And nobody answers their hand to say yes, that it hasn't increased. My next question is, how many people go to the grocery store and spend less than they did a year ago? No one raises their hand. And my last question is, how many people in the room got a raise in the last year? And maybe one person may raise their hand. So what that says to you is that you might have been comfortable a year ago, but things are happening that your buying power is shrinking and your income is not increasing. So one of the first things that I focus on is multiple streams of income, not just being dependent on one income, because, things happen. And we always live life thinking that we're always going to have a job. Everything is always going to be perfect. Our income is always going to be the same. And we may be comfortable when we make our decisions, but we don't factor in the unexpected. So my thing is, people need to have the mindset of, not that nothing's going to ever happen, is when it's going to happen. And so to start to prepare for that as if, it's going to happen in a month, it's going to happen 2 weeks from now, and to not overspend, but making sure that you have a reserve to help you when those unexpected things happen in your life. When it comes to couples, it's a little more, and before I go to couples, I do also want to say, the one thing I believe in is a customized budget based upon your lifestyle. I don't believe in the cookie cutter, 30% this or whatever, because everybody has a different lifestyle. And I think a lot of times the reason why people do not live or say, I can't keep this budget, is because it's not realistic to them. If you're the type of person that you need to have your hair done every 2 weeks, then put it in your budget, because you're going to do it and you don't want to mess up your budget because you didn't include it. If you're the type of person to say, hey, I'd rather spend more in having a nicer house and less on my car, as long as it's within your income, I'm okay with that, because you have to feel good about, your lifestyle and what you're living. So it's more customized to you.
Got it.
So that's key. And then for married couples, which is an interesting story, when I first got married, me and my husband were opposites. I was the one, budgeting money. And, and I used to go by the philosophy that I've always heard, is that as couples, you should pool your money together. And that just didn't work. And so in order for my marriage to work, I had to pray and say, okay, God, give me a solution that can work for me and him. And so the solution I found that worked is we have a joint account that we put funds into to cover the household expenses. And then we have 2 personal accounts. So when the money comes in, there's a certain amount that goes into his personal, my personal, and then there's, the rest that goes into household to take care of the household expenses. And then the person that's stronger of the 2 with money handles the household expense account to make sure all those things are paid. And then he can go ahead and do what he wants to do with his personal, and I can do the same with mine. Because, he kind of felt like, as the man of the house, I got to call you to spend $100. Do we have $100? And so that wasn't working for him, which I understood.
I understand that.
You know how men are. So I've been married 13 years now. So yay!
It's working. That's awesome.
Yes, it's
great.
working. So now he feels like he has, funds that he can do whatever he wants to do with, and he doesn't have to be accountable to me for that. And I also have my account to, do those things that women like to do, like shop, and I don't have to be accountable to him. Right. And it doesn't affect our household.
So, Chandra, so I think that is a great strategy for people who don't want to feel like they're being micromanaged by their partner or their spouse.
Yes.
In terms of the funds and spending. how do you guys handle, or how do you suggest handling savings and investments? Would that be part of what's taken out of the joint account for a married couple or
Right.
couple?
No, that would be separate. So that would be something that I would include in the household account. And once again, the stronger person, I mean, I still think that there should be some discussion because, of course, we know when investments, there's risk when it comes to that. But I still say the stronger person of the two should be the one handling the investment. So maybe there's a fourth account, for
Yeah.
investments. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. So this idea of multiple streams of income is very interesting to me. And it's something that I've become, I've been exploring personally over the last couple of years. But what would you say, and I have my own business, so, I have different ideas about how that can happen, but what do you say to the person who is like a career educator,
Mhm.
for example, or somebody who is in, works for Intel or Microsoft, or, and they're in this career, they plan to be in the career for the rest of their lives, how do they get multiple streams of income?
Exactly. So for someone that has that has a corporate career, which is what I had in the beginning before I started working for my ministry, I would say try to identify hobbies that you like. If you like to sew, then maybe you can start sewing things, and then on the weekend go to craft fairs and start selling some of your items. What skill set do you have? If you like to write, now with the internet, you can maybe say, hey, anybody looking for ghostwriters, or, anybody looking for proofreaders. So, taking those skill sets or whatever it is that you like to do, that you can do part-time on the side on the weekend, at least that's bringing in another income. So, God forbid you lose your job or they shut down, you don't have anything. At least you already have something working. You have additional income that you can use to sustain yourself, while you're trying to recover through this process.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Um, so then another question I have, and this pertains to single people. So say you have a single person, and their expenses are increasing, their salary is staying the same. They're afraid that their job is going to go away, or their job does go away, and they don't have any reserve, and so where do they turn? What do they do? Do you advocate credit cards at that point? What strategies do you have for a person in that situation?
Yeah, well, if you haven't been saving and you find yourself in that situation, of course, there's unemployment, which is definitely not going to pay your check, or pay you what you were getting paid. Is only going to be a percentage. And then I think it goes back to the same philosophy that I talked about with the church, where you have to prioritize, okay, what things are most important. There's also programs out here now because there's so many people going through. I know in Georgia, I'm not sure where I am, there's called a home safe program. Anybody that lost their job or income has significantly been decreased, where they have a program where they will assist you with either reducing your house payments or paying your payments for you for a period of time to help you recover. So I would definitely say to search out the resources in your area that are available to you, because there are resources out there, and a lot of times they're underused because people don't know about them or people don't seek for them. So I would say to do that, and then to prioritize. I don't advocate the credit cards, but if you have them and you have to, then sometimes you have to do what you have to do. You just have to be careful because, with the credit cards, if you ever get to a point where you have to prioritize and you can't make, the minimum payment that they're requiring, then of course, the interest rate goes up, the late fees, and, it just goes out of control at that point, which, in my book, I do talk about me losing my job and going through some of those things. And so, as a result of that, I did have to, not pay some credit cards because I had to focus on living, eating, sleeping,
Right.
keeping my car so that I could, get to a new job. So.
Right. Yeah. And so, from an emotional standpoint, and I don't know if you can speak to this at all, but people in this situation that I've come across feel so hopeless. When they've lost a job or they hear that the company is downsizing, they feel so hopeless, and they feel like they're never going to dig themselves out of the hole. And you've just given a personal example where you were in this situation. So what would you say to people who are there and just feel powerless?
Right. I would say get around some other people that can encourage you, or talk to somebody maybe that has been in that situation before, to help you come out of that situation, because, it is a struggle sometimes. You feel like you're by yourself and nobody is going through you, and you may even be embarrassed or ashamed and not want to tell people. So I would just say try and seek out, some type of counseling or someone that can help encourage you, through that time period, because it's really about, like you said, not getting down, not feeling defeated, but knowing that you can overcome, because I'm a Christian. I went to my church and, my prayer life with God and, my prayer team to kind of help me through the situation. But, if someone doesn't have a church or a prayer group, then I would just say try and find somebody that's been through that situation to help encourage you and walk you through that, so you don't feel alone and by yourself and like you're the only one, going through. And even maybe volunteering, go and volunteer, at a homeless shelter, and, that's enough to say, wow, at least I do have a roof over my head, and it's not as bad as I think it is.
Exactly.
It could be worse.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So, and maybe I got us a little off track. So, I want to go back to the single people, and you talked about multiple streams of income, and then with the married people getting on the same page. So then what would you tell people to do next?
So one of the things that I found is it's a mindset, especially if you find yourself in debt. So you have to identify what targets or what habits have you developed that you may have to change. And part of that change is recognizing it and being able to do that. Like for me, one of the things was I was an impulse shopper. And I knew that that was my weakness. So I had to stay out of the stores, number one. I just didn't go to look because I couldn't look, because if I saw it, I liked it, I wanted it, I brought it home on my credit card. And I didn't need to do that. It's not like I need another pair of shoes or another dress.
Right.
So, and one of the other strategies I got was, if I saw it and I knew it was an impulse buy, I would say, I'm going to leave it. And if I still want it, I'm going to come back in 48 to 72 hours. If, I still think about it. And I found 80% of the time I forgot about it when I went home. So I really didn't need it. It was really an impulse buy because I saw it, I liked it, I wanted it.
Yes. Yes. Good strategies. I think you and I would be friends if we lived in the same town. Because
we like the same things.
Yeah. Okay. So those are great tips. And would you say anything different than as a next step for getting out of paycheck to the married people or partnered people who are listening?
Yes. So to the married people, I would say definitely you and your spouse being in agreement, I think is key. But I think, still having that separate account gives that person that they don't feel so restricted. And then once again, it comes to priority. What's the priority items that we have to have? Being creative of where you can cut. And a lot of times, I always say we have not because we ask not. I found that if you call the credit card companies and ask for a lower interest rate, sometimes they'll do it. I've also found, like with cell phone companies, you can call, and say, hey, I'm looking to reduce my bill, and there's different plans out there that they can offer you to help because they don't want to lose your business. You can definitely call your cable company and say, hey, this bill is too high. And so a lot of times if you just call and request to have your bill reduced, or say, hey, I'm going somewhere else, they'll work with you. They'll reduce it. Most of the times they don't want to lose the business, especially in this type of economy. So that's another way to kind of help, control your costs or to bring down your expenses. Refinancing sometimes, if the interest rate has gone down and you've had your car for a couple of years, look at some of those options. So you have to be creative. And that's one of the things that, I encourage people to do, is let's be creative in finding ways to reduce your expenses.
Okay. So being creative. What about debt consolidation loans? Do you have any thoughts on those? And I don't know a lot about them, but I just hear of people who come into the office and say they're exploring them, and I never know what to say.
Yes. Well, I don't advocate debt consolidation loans if you are taking unsecured debt like credit card debt, and now you're securing it on a debt consolidation loan based upon the equity in your house. because what happens is now it's connected to your house. So if you can't pay it, now you lose your house and it's affecting your house, versus if it's unsecured like a credit card, if you can't pay it, it's just your credit mess. And not just your credit, but you know what I'm saying. It's not your house being on the line. So the only way I would advocate that is if it's not tied to, if it's a personal loan, then that's fine. But I wouldn't do it through a home equity type loan.
Okay, thank you. That's really good information.
You're welcome.
Okay. So what about bankruptcy? And I know bankruptcy is really individual to the individual or to the couple, but at what point, can you give general guidelines to people about at what point they should start considering this as an option?
Yeah, I don't like bankruptcy, and that's just me in particular. I think that's the last option, because I think, if you go out and you make the credit, then you should do everything in your power to try and pay it back. But I know we all make mistakes. So, if you really have exhausted all your options and you're just upside down, and a lot of times in divorces, that happens a lot, where it makes sense, to go ahead and do the bankruptcy, because you've inherited some debt that you guys were paying as a couple, and now you may be responsible and your income just doesn't, sustain you being able to do that. So, it really is a strain on you. So, that's kind of what I would say on bankruptcy.
Okay. All right. So exhaust all of your options before you look at that.
Yes. I would say that would be a last option when, I talk to people. Yes.
All right. Okay. Are there any other general guidelines that you can give people? And I know a lot of this is probably covered in your book, but not all of it. But guidelines for getting out of this paycheck to paycheck rut that so many people are in.
Yes. So the guideline is that we first have to learn to live within our means. One of the things that I encourage people to do is when they budget, to budget based upon when you get paid. So if you get paid every 2 weeks, then you should do your monthly budget, listing your bills, listing the due dates, listing your 2 checks that you get. Let's say if you get paid twice a month, those 2 checks, and then say, okay, which check am I going to pay these bills with? And a lot of times what you'll find by doing that in advance before you get the money, that, maybe you have a reserve from the first check, but on the second check you're short. But by doing it in advance, you can, shift something maybe to the next paycheck, and so you kind of know what you have. So I think the key thing is sitting down in advance, assessing it, prioritizing the priorities, seeing where you can cut expenses, what items can you reduce to stay within your means, and trying to live without credit cards, because I know that, once you get involved in the credit cards and you're just making a minimum payment, you're paying, if you ever looked at it, if you make the minimum payment, you're paying more interest than you are down the principal. And, you'll be paying it forever. So, not to use that as a source. And if you have to use that every month, then that says that there's a problem and you really need to assess your expenses to try and reduce. And if you can't do it on your own, then I would say definitely seek out advice to get someone to kind of help you.
Okay, great. And so what kind of person would an individual who's struggling with finances, who would they seek out?
Yes, I will seek out like a financial planner, as, a person to kind of help you.
All right.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that I deal with have children. Mm-hmm. And, as most people know, the children kind of mirror what they see in everyday life in terms of everything, language, behavior, and I'm sure financial habits. And so, how can a person get their child off on the right foot in terms of, having a successful financial future, and at what age is this appropriate?
Yeah, and I would say as soon as possible, as soon as the child can understand the value of a dollar, I would start. My daughter is 12, and I think when I started with her, she might have been 10. And, I had her do chores around the house. I gave her an allowance, and when she would go to the store, it was always, I want. I said, well, this is what you have. And everything that you want costs more than what you have. So you have to choose what you're going to get, what you're going to leave. And it's like, oh, mommy's just not going to get it. And then, you know, sometimes she realized when she said she want, and I said, well, you have to buy it. So she say, okay. And then she asked me how much it costs and how much she's going to have left. Then she decides, well, you know what? I don't want that because I don't want to spend all my money because I'm not going to have much left if I do that. So I started early with her, just, you know, teaching her the value of money by having her work for it, giving her allowance, telling her about saving, you know, and then having her make decisions to say this is all you have. So you have to stay with what you have.
Yep. Okay, so that's great. So at what point, did you have any ideas or opinions on at what point it's appropriate to say to a kid, you know, okay, you can have a bank account, you can have your own debit card?
I don't know about debit card. I would say a bank account, you know, I would still think around the age of 8 to 10, I think it's okay for, you know, them to have a bank account. I probably wouldn't do a debit card because, you know, my daughter wants one because, you know, one of my girlfriend's son has a debit card, and I'm like, no way. Sorry. So yeah. I would probably say, you know, maybe high school, I would probably start to teach her about debit cards and credit cards because we all know when we get to college, you definitely need, you know, to understand that because so much is available to you. So I would probably start high school.
Okay. Chandra, do people still use check registers? Do you encourage people to still use check registers? Because, you know, I think that in a lot of people, with a lot of people I know, you know, the way of figuring out what's in the bank account is by going to the ATM and getting a receipt. You know?
I cringe when I hear that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I do think that people should still use a check register. And even if you're the type of person where you know you're not going to reconcile the account, I would at least say use the check register to document the physical checks that you're writing, because with the debit card, they're so immediate now. Gas takes a couple of days, but everything else is usually so immediate. As soon as you do it, you know, it's taken from your account. But the checks are the things that take time to process, and the check may not have cleared, and then you forgot that you wrote the check and you spend the money, and then now your account is overdrawn, and now you have all these unnecessary fees. So I would at least say if you don't reconcile, at least keep the register to document what checks you're writing, who you wrote it to, and how much it was.
Okay. That's great. You know, and it's something that occurred to me as you were talking about documenting and just kind of keeping a log of what you're spending. You know, a lot of times when I've gone on different eating plans or diets or whatever, that, you know, they say keep a journal for 30 days of everything that you're putting into your mouth. And
yes,
you know, I guess when people used to write mostly checks, you know, that was a benefit of check registers because they had to document. You know, right. Maybe that's something to get back to so people can see all the little piddly stuff that they're wasting money on.
Exactly. Well, actually, one of the things I do when I help people put together their budgets, once they tell me what they're spending, I ask them, can I see your debit card register for 2 months? And then, you know, I ask questions like, well, how much you think you spend eating out? And then they give me some number. And then when I go through their debit card and start adding up stuff, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was that much money. And so, like you said, definitely, if you're writing checks, and that's why I don't recommend cash, because a lot of times with cash, you don't know where you spend it, you just know it's gone. Mm-hmm. So at least with the debit card, we can go back and look and trace what things have you been spending your money on outside of, you know, your regular household expenses.
Okay, and so you brought up a point that I'm interested in talking just a minute about, because I've heard some people recommend, some financial people recommend that, you know, you give yourself, you know, in your budget, say you budget yourself $200 a month for entertainment, which could include, you know, movies, it could include eating out, and so they say just take out $200 cash, and when that cash is gone, that cash is gone. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Unless you're really good at cash, I would say no. Kind of under my system, similar to what I said about doing it by paycheck. So basically, when you get paid, you sit down and you pay everything that you documented that should be paid. So if once everything is done, whatever is left, it's what's left for entertainment. So you don't necessarily have to have cash, because all you're going to have left in the bank, you know, is entertainment. Everything else will have been moved out and paid.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're about to the end, Chandra, and can you tell the listeners a little bit about your book, Money Does Matter, and what it covers, and then how you can help people and where they can find you?
Yes. So my book, Money Does Matter, I start off by telling my story being a financial planner and how I found myself in over $50,000 worth of credit card debt, not having a job, being foreclosed on my house, being a person with good credit, now being in a situation where credit was being denied to me, and people that I had helped succeed were doing better than I was. And so that was, a low point in my life, but how I came through it. So I kind of share some of the strategies of the things that I did of how I came through it. As well, I give some scriptural references according to the Word of God to encourage you about what God says about prospering us. And then in addition, I walk through how to create a budget, or I call a spending plan for those people who don't like the word budget because they think it's restrictive. And then I tell you about how to protect your income. And so I talk about things like insurance, which sometimes we don't get, but that's a protector of our income if things happen. So, and I also talk about credit. Credit represents you, and understanding your credit report and making adjustments to that as well. So that's what the book focuses on. You can reach out to me or find more information about me on my website, which is www.moneymattercw.com. Also, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under Chandra Winford. And I do webinars, I do workshops, and I just recently started a mentoring program for 5 women that I'm mentoring for a 12-week boot camp. And at the end of the 12 weeks, I plan to put it online, to have it be an online course to allow more people to go through the course that says, I really need help and I need somebody to help mentor me through this process.
Excellent. That's great. So, and do you have any idea how much that course is going to cost at this point, Chandra?
Not yet, because I'm developing it as I go with this first group. So this is kind of like the test group. So
got it. Yep. Okay. Well, so that's something to look out for people who might be struggling with money and need help. I mean, keep your eye on Chandra. And Chandra, one other question: how long ago did you go through your experience where you didn't have a job and you had all the debt?
Right. That was back in 2000. Around 2006.
Okay.
Yeah, 2006. So, and when I foreclosed on my house, it took 3 years for me to recover, and I was able to get another home.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And so you can see Chandra here. Anybody who's listening who needs to hear this episode, I mean, she's happy, she's wise, and she's turned it around, and you can do it too. So thank you for sharing with us, Chandra. I appreciate the gift of your time.
Thank you, Wendy, for having me.
You're welcome. And for all you out there listening, that's going to do it for this episode of the Family Law Insider podcast. Remember, we're on your side when it matters most, and I will see you next time.